And there we go. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're really excited to have some special guests with us to talk about procurement, especially from the lens of the United States Digital Service, and in this case, at the Department of Homeland Security. So thank you so much to Michael, Andrew, and Erica for joining us. Since we have a smaller group tonight, I'd love for everybody to go around, say your name, where it is that you're located, and even though it doesn't feel like fall here because it's over 80 degrees in the Bay Area, what is your favorite thing about fall? And I will start by calling folks out in the order that I see in my Brady Bunch screen. So we will start with Cyrus.
Hey, I'm Cyrus. I'm in DC. And my favorite thing about fall is probably fall clothes. I really like plaid and flannel and just like fall things that you wear. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you. Ben, you're up next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Trevino. I'm in Honolulu. We don't have fall here, but actually what I like about fall today is eating fall foods like soups and things, which we still like to do to pretend.
Perfect. Thank you. Will Scora, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Will. I guess my favorite thing about the fall is I really love just seeing the leaves changing color.
Awesome. And Will, where are you located?
Oh, Cleveland, Ohio, site of the Shears Brigade Congress.
Awesome. Thank you. Dan Turner, you're up next.
Hi. It's great learning about local fall or not really fall costumes, places I've never been. I'm in Oakland, and yes, it's warm. And I guess what I like about fall is it just feels, the air feels cleaner and the color of the light changes, which I really enjoy. I also have to say that I'm just going to volunteer with Code for America for a bit and a mentor, and I'm actively sort of applying to government design positions. So I'm going to just sit back and listen and try to learn from you all. And if it's okay if I learn.
Yeah, no, that's great. Absolutely. And feel free to ask any questions when we get to the Q&A portion.
Thank you.
Annie, you're up next. Is your microphone working?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I am also commuting. So I'm from San Jose, and my favorite thing about fall is probably also the clothing, because I like getting snuggy in my oversized sweatshirts.
Perfect. Thank you. Howard Mattis, you're up next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I'm in the Bay Area, and what I like about it is we don't have fog in the fall, so we got nice, clear weather where we can see for long distances.
Perfect. Thank you. David Ginsburg, I have you up next.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I missed the question. I jumped in a minute ago.
No worries. The question is your name, where you're from, and your favorite thing about fall.
Cool. So I'm David Ginsburg. I'm logging in from Delaware, Open Data Delaware. And favorite thing about fall, I think, is there's a brief time during fall when indoors and outdoors are comfortable in the same clothing. And then suddenly you have to put on a bunch of layers when you go outside instead of taking off a bunch of layers when you go outside.
Awesome. Thank you. Tim, you're up next. And you're on mute. Oh, there you go. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Tim. I'm calling in from Mountain View, California. And my favorite thing about fall is, I guess I don't really have fall here right now, but I just came in from London for the last couple of years. So yeah, I enjoyed just getting to wear coats.
Nice. Thank you. Let's see. Bonnie, are you able to tell us your name and where you're from and your favorite thing about fall?
Sure. My name is Bonnie Wolf, Hack-for-LA, Los Angeles, obviously. And my favorite thing about fall is boots, for sure.
Great, thank you. Andrew, I have you up next.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Andrew. So I'm saying where I'm from or where I am.
Where you're from and your favorite thing about fall.
Milwaukee. And my favorite thing about fall is when it's just under that summer warm temperature and the leaves are turning, just being outside anywhere.
Awesome. And Michael, we have you up last.
I'm assuming you mean me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Name's Michael McKinley. I'm from Eugene, Oregon. And honestly, fall, I really like it because it gives me an excuse to spend more time in my wood shop.
Awesome. Thank you. And tell the parrots we say hi.
Will do.
And then Tom, will you please introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Tom at Code for America in Oakland, and my favorite thing about fall, I'll go with something very specific when you're carving a pumpkin. The feeling of putting your hand in the pumpkin and scooping out the seeds.
Awesome, thank you. I'll introduce myself. My name is Veronica Young. I'm here at Code for America, and my favorite thing about fall is going to the pumpkin patch, especially now that I have a daughter. It's really fun to go with kids. And now I would like to turn it over to our guests to introduce themselves. So Michael, I will start with you. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at USDS?
Yes, and thank you for having me. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Michael Palmer. I'm with the U.S. Digital Service at DHS. My favorite thing about the fall, even though I don't know if that's what you wanted, but my favorite thing about the fall is it's the beginning of movie season. So there was a big, kind of dead time between 4th of July. There might be something coming out right after that, but then it's kind of dead until late September, early October. I remember seeing The Social Network come out a couple of years ago around that time and was blown away. Anyway, so at US Digital Service, everybody has a superpower. Typically, as the community probably knows, we hire product managers, engineers, and designers. And then there's random folks like me that do bureaucracy hacking. So my superpower is an acquisition strategist. So I help program offices get better outcomes on their procurements for the benefit of the public.
Awesome, thank you so much. And special thank you to you, Michael, for being so willing to hold this webinar for everybody and workshop. I'm really excited to be able to be here with you and your colleagues. And with that, Erica, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Erica Evans. I am coming up on my 10-year anniversary of working for Homeland Security. The first 7 years, I was in a contracting job and a contracting officer working on DHS IT contracts. And then just 3 years ago, moved over to the digital service at DHS, where I get to advise on contracts and help the government put out better requirements and have better source selection so that they can get contractors that are excited about doing good work and improving the government. And there's a lot of opportunities to take advantage of the government kind of being a slow player in the field. And I guess with the contracting work that I do, I try to help minimize those opportunities and also attract companies that aren't as interested in that kind of thing. And my favorite thing about fall is the smell of bonfires and like fire pits in the backyard.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew, can you please introduce yourself and tell us what do you do?
Yeah, hi everyone. Andrew Miller. I'm a recovering member of the U.S. Digital Service at DHS, now 9 months sober. I am now the design lead for AWS Amazon IoT, so Internet of Things, making industry and everything smarter using connected devices. And what I did at U.S. Digital Service and why I'm here as part of this panel is I was a subject matter expert for user experience design on many of the procurements that Michael and Erica were both part of as well. So I helped advise the evaluators on what to look for when it came to the contractor's ability to practice what they preach in terms of user experience design. Oh, and my favorite thing about fall is, and I'm surprised nobody said it, it's football season. So maybe I'm alone in that, but I'm excited. And there is a game on tonight, so I've got to get off soon. I'm just kidding.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. So tonight's style of the workshop is going to be a little bit different than we normally have. So since we have the opportunity to be able to talk to Michael, Andrew, and Erica, we're going to do somewhat of a panel style interview where I will ask some questions. I will be perfectly honest in the fact that I'm probably on the lower end of knowledge of the procurement system. So that's where the questions will be coming from, but I'm sure that we have a range of knowledge among the folks here on the workshop. So I will be asking a few questions to each of you, and then we'll leave the last 30 minutes or so open for questions from the audience. So with that, let me let Whitney into our room here. Hi, Whitney.
Hey.
Hey. And we will get started with some questions. So one of the things at Code for America is that we want to look towards how the procurement process currently works and work towards ways towards improving it. So the simple question is, what is procurement and how does it work? And Erica, I'll start with you.
Okay, great. Procurement in my world is the process by which the government buys things. And it is very bureaucratic, but it's primarily set up to make sure that, like, as a contracting officer, I can't just award all of the contracts to my uncle, but to make sure, I mean, the government spends a lot of money and money is power in some ways, in a lot of ways. And so to make sure that the money is spent fairly for the best product that meets the government needs, and also takes into account giving opportunities to small businesses and sort of a wider network than just the major players in the game. There's a lot of procurement rules that try to do their best to level the playing field and give opportunities to entry. It's flawed, but that's essentially what government procurement is meant to be.
Okay, wonderful. And what are some of the types of things that one would bid on through the procurement process? And I'll ask, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, anything over $35,000 or $10,000, depending on like what group you're going for. But I'll let someone else answer.
Okay.
I was going to say, don't ask me these questions. I'm going to get a completely wrong answer.
All right, I'll take a quick stab. So, I mean, basically, whether it's toilet paper or cruise missiles or guard services or design and development support, the government buys everything, right? Real estate, all kinds of stuff. So design and development support is what we usually get involved with. Those are typically called services contracts. And that's where Erica and myself and pretty much everybody in the U.S. Digital Service is looking for companies that do amazing work out in the private sector that may want to get into government work, typically to create amazing experiences for the public as they choose to interact with the government, or they're forced to interact with the government through government services.
Wonderful. Erica, I wanted to touch on something that you said in terms of looking to make the procurement process more inclusive of a variety of folks. Can you talk a little bit more about how that process works in order to not just get the major players in the game, but including other folks in this process?
Yeah, there's a huge emphasis. All the contracting shops kind of have numbers that they're supposed to hit and track how many of their contracts go to large businesses, mid-sized businesses, small businesses. And then within small business, the government categorizes women-owned small business, service-disabled, veteran-owned small business, veteran, oh yeah, that is veteran, hub zone, which is like when you're in a historically underutilized business zone, 8A, which is otherwise disadvantaged small business. There's not a ton, but there's several categories that businesses can register for. And then the government can set aside a procurement. So if the government has a procurement and says like, yeah, we think that a small business could do this work, then the government is required to set aside that the competition for that work, and like they would have to write a document and explain why they would give it to a large business when a small business could do the work. And like the VA, for instance, is actually required to do all their set-asides for service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses. But there's like different categories that you can sort of set your work aside in. And actually, well, I'll let Mike talk about the 8A because he's done a lot of work around creating opportunities for 8A businesses.
A lot of the programs that Erica mentioned, there's a lot of pressure on contracting officers, their executives because they have to report these numbers to Congress, right? And so there's a lot of pressure to meet. It's almost a quota, right? Which is a good thing. It's a very good thing. And so you get a lot of diversity. And this also, I think, happens to a degree at the state and local level as well. So it's not just federal, but it's really intense at the federal level. And I'm not as familiar with the local and state levels. But one specific category, the 8A category, which I can post a link to that talks about the 8A, what that means. But we formed a partnership with the Small Business Administration to set up a specific program that encourages the use of 8A contractors. Typically, program offices don't want to use or they're not encouraged to use small business programs. And I'm talking about the people with the actual dollars and the mission assigned to them, not the contracting shops that help them. Because once you put a requirement, once you put a need into a small business program and you're getting support under that small business program, you have to stay in that program forever, basically. And so there's some resistance from program offices to use those programs. And so it's a dynamic. But US Digital Service created a digital service contracting initiative, which releases the program office from needing to stay in the 8A program after a contract's completed. And so that, along with being able to sole source that contract under $4 million to any 8A that exists out there is pretty attractive to program offices that can quickly get the support that they need to accomplish what they want to do to help their users.
Interesting. I'm learning so much already. I'm like, maybe we should have scheduled this for a couple hours.
No, that's the 102 conversation, right? The 101.
Awesome. No, this is great. Thank you. So if I say that I work for a company and I'm interested in submitting a bid, how does that process work? Bless you, Erica.
Yeah, so within the RFPs that are put out, requests for proposals, government speak, I guess, within those requests for proposals, the contracting shop usually inserts subcontracting requirements. And so companies are looking for small businesses with certain classifications and sometimes with no classifications. So that's one easy way to entree into the government space is you're classified as an 8A or a woman-owned small business or a hub zone business, which means you're based in an economically disadvantaged area. And so reaching out to companies that might have those needs for those types of companies. And it's hard to find good companies that deliver anyway, much less a company in a certain business classification. Did I answer your question? I think I just kind of went off on that, but Erica or Andrew.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it's very formulaic how you respond to a government proposal. And if you've never done it before, you should get advice from someone who knows the ropes, because it is not logical and it is not intuitive. And government requirements that are sort of made public are very often full of like boilerplate language, and it really takes a practiced eye to read a request for proposal and know what the government is asking for, because we just can't do it in plain language. That would be too easy and too simple. I wish we could. We should be able to. But so it's all sort of open. But I think Mike's recommendation is great, is to like go with a company that already kind of knows the government space a little bit. I just think it would be very hard to do this without any kind of guidance, because it doesn't make sense, and it's often like contradicts itself internally, and it's hard to read through something and know what the government is really asking for, because a lot of times it's not very well thought through.
Another thing to potentially look for to make it easier, make the proposal process easier, is to look for not written proposals. Look for capability demonstrations where you can go in and actually do a thing, and this is kind of setting up Andrew to jump in and describe his experience if you want to go there now. But that's one of the techniques that we propose, is for program offices to have capability demonstrations rather than have folks submit written proposals. So they can bring awesome companies in that don't know how to have to game the system and write proposals. They just have to come in and do the thing in front of you, and you can see if they're awesome or not. And Andrew was a part of one that we did at DHS that had 114 companies come in and perform in front of us within a 3-week time frame, and he can kind of explain how what it was like to be involved in that. Andrew?
Yeah, no, and I can jump in something that I think, Veronica, you were talking about earlier, is if you were a business, right, and you wanted to work for the government, essentially, you wanted your business to do business with the government. As somebody who has actually done that, set up my own, with a few colleagues, service disabled veteran-owned small business, there's a lot of acronyms. I don't want to butcher it because I know this is being recorded, but maybe Erica and Mike can tell me exactly what it is. But you can't just do business with the government. You can't just set up an LLC and say, hey, I want to do business, and just start networking. There are a lot of prerequisites that you have to do just to do business with the government in general. And then if you want to access one of the specific contracts that Mike was talking about, such as the 8A program that they set up, you have to apply, and you have to do this very long and arduous process to set up your company under that title as well. So you probably heard of the DUNS number, the SAM system. I know there's a bunch of acronyms, and I've tried to put it out of my brain as much as possible. But in general, it's not as easy to just create a government that does digital services in the private sector, who is maybe quite good at networking around in their local area. They can't necessarily just say, I want to go help my local government or my state government build better digital services. It doesn't work that way. And so there's this huge process, which, the reason why I like to be involved in these kind of discussions is educating people that you need to do your homework if you want to even think about doing business in the government. Because for myself, it was almost a 12-month runway before I was even able to effectively start answering RFPs and my company being taken seriously by contract shops. So that goes for any of you dealing with any really smart, awesome digital service companies that are doing great work in the social impact areas or the civic tech areas. If they don't have all of those prerequisites to work with government, maybe put an earworm in their heads and get them started on that process, because it takes a long time. And to the point Mike made and Erica made, is you need help from somebody that knows, that has done it before. There aren't necessarily the best books written about this. It's very difficult to get into effectively without burning all of your money.
Yeah, so when I was coaching up folks trying to get non-traditionals to what we call non-traditionals, basically not the Beltway bandits, trying to get non-traditionals to invest in coming into the market, coming in, taking an interest in our work and throwing their hat in the ring. I was telling them that, listen, one, you got to register in SAM. You got to have your DUNS number too. And that's basically kind of the bare bones. And Erica, is there anything else that I'm missing? I mean, you just went through the process, Andrew, so I think you got hit like a hammer with going through the certification and whatnot, but that's not required to just be a contractor, right, Erica?
I think, I mean, once you win a contract, your personnel have to be like, vetted, that go through the security process. Like it's very bureaucratic, but I guess what I would add is that it's also just a space where there's so much good that can be done and so much opportunity to improve government services for people who need it. And where it's just so necessary to have smart people who want to make government services better. And I mean, government has a terrible reputation for all websites and services, and those can be made better, and it's not that hard. It's just hard to get there. And I mean, you get paid more than fairly to do it too. The government doesn't really know what things should cost. So, or maybe we're reimbursing you for the time that for the 12 months that it took to get stood up and get through our process. But yeah, don't be scared away.
Interesting. So I guess one question that's applicable to our audience here is particularly when you're looking at RFPs coming through for building websites, what are some of the conditions that you look for to make a successful application?
So, I mean, the types of vendors we're looking for. So one thing that Andrew and I have found, and Erica have found in our competitions that we architected, is that that design is the difference, and knowing how to engage with users, tease out their needs, and translate that into a product and do that iteratively. Hardly anybody in DC or in the government space knows how to do that. And that's what we're finding. That's what we've found over the last 3 years. And so I'm going to hand it over to Andrew and after kind of sharing that.
Yeah, I'm gonna tease that out a little bit. There are a lot of shops that are design shops, and there are a lot of shops that are technology and product shops. And very rarely what we found out is there are few places that either through a prime, which is the main contractor on the contract, or the subcontractors, very rarely do we see the Jay-Z, the trifecta of design, tech, and product forming an equal foundation. Usually we have a lot of shops that have read the books on lean development, have read the books on agile, any process you can think about. And they have gotten every certification from every place. They are Lean Sigma 6 black belts, whatever the hell that is. But very rarely did we find were shops that put user experience and customer experience, if you want to make it a broader scope, customer experience as an equal partner in their missions. So both at their firms and then in how they propose they would do business with the government. And unfortunately, in the history of RFPs, requirements are baked into the contract. A lot of times they said, the system will do this, the system will do that, the system will do whatever. And what we found is companies that ended up winning some of the contracts were more successful when they could demonstrate, we've heard you on your requirements and we think that we can tease these out with you, but then do things that US Digital Service does, which is, okay, so you've created requirements. We're not going to discount those, but have you talked to any of your end users that are going to be using this system? Have you done any sort of validation before we go and build this thing? Have you done, have you measured twice? So not just fully discounting requirements and saying, no, you're wrong, government. We're going to bring in our user experience professionals and we're going to scrap all of your requirements. But understand that with requirements, there's this ability to both work those out a little bit and then also take a step back and say, you've just hit us over the head with a bunch of requirements that's not necessarily equal to what users need to be able to do on this system. And we, to Mike's point, is we found a pattern that there were some really great partnerships or single companies even that had user experience designers in leadership positions at the companies. That's big. That's not by any means, that's not the way that companies win contracts, but that's the number one thing is, do you trust and respect user experience professionals enough to put them in leadership positions in your company? 2, that shows us that there's a dedication to that craft and the ability to work that into the product development cycle. And 3, it shows this ability to work in user experience design into product development, because what we saw when companies tried to mesh together a teaming where they said, okay, take this strong development shop with strong product managers and then just throw on top this great design consulting firm, that didn't work. They thought, oh, let's just put some really strong single threaded designers on it. But there's no cohesion. The designers couldn't mesh into the agile development process. And then we were doing this agile fall where there were months and months of discovery and great prototypes and pitching to, stakeholders and people high up. And then development shops came in and they're like, we can't build this. They didn't discuss technical feasibility about this. This is never going to happen within 10 years. So we saw a lot of that where design shops came in, did really great things. I mean, awesome, groundbreaking designs that would truly change the experience. But then the development shop after that came in that had to actually develop that said, this isn't happening. We can't do that. So what we found is companies that are successful in meshing in user experience design into the product development process and then don't use jargon to describe it. You can really pick out who's read the books, who's read the UX design books and been on Medium for a couple of days straight. You can pick out those people. And what Mike was talking about is when they come in to show us, when they can kind of show us their capabilities, we're able to pick out the people who truly know how to work design into a constrained area. Be it a take-home assignment, right, where we give them a couple of weeks to complete something, or a 4-hour assessment, or whatever, a 4-hour evaluation. Designers who don't know what they're talking about come in and say, if we had more time, we would do user research, we would do this and that and that and that. But what we found is the truly successful companies as a team understood the constraints and were able to work in tech, product, and design all within the constraints that we built. Which is what we look for. And that was really long-winded. Mike,
hand it over to Erica, because she has at least 2 examples of competitions that she was in, one specifically to create a design-only contract that was meant to go out and integrate with existing development teams. And did that go so good? Anyway. I
think the procurement piece went pretty well. But we did a contract specifically to hire 10 designers in to the government to do the design work that the development contractors weren't doing. And the procurement piece went great. I feel pretty confident that we got a reasonably good design firm in. But
how did you evaluate them? What were the factors? I forgot. How could you tell if they were good or not?
We had them do a 7-page written proposal to start with, and where they talked about design and actually submitted websites that they had designed already. It was kind of like a portfolio, but like it had to be a publicly accessible link that we could access. And so kind of comparing how they talked about design with their actual execution of that design on that project was really revealing. Did they know what they were talking about or not? So that was pretty revealing. And then we had them come in and do a live design demonstration. Although I would say that the most useful part, like the design demonstration at that point, it was like good firms who knew what they were doing, and it didn't end up shedding that much light on who was going to be the best match for us. It was still very, very close, but it was that first sifting of looking at websites that they'd built that was clear. However, my advice though for proposing on a government contract is read the fine print. I can't tell you how many times as a contracting officer I've seen really good proposals from companies that submitted something wrong and have to be cut out on the technicality, even if they're the best offerer. But if they just didn't follow the instructions correctly, it's really heartbreaking when you're like, well, that's the best offerer. Yeah. But we've done months and months and months of work on this point, and we can't cancel the requirement and redo it to make it more clear for this offer because, you know, our program office, the people who are buying this thing for really need the service to start already a year ago. And that would be my number one advice is like, do not ever get cut out on a technicality because you submitted an extra page or didn't understand that you were supposed to submit it in a different format or something like that. Those are the easiest things to avoid. But I think very often it's companies that are not used to the government space that think that like, you know, those things don't matter as much, but they really end up mattering a lot. The other thing I would say is like a little bit different advice from Andrew and Mike, but read through the proposal. And if the proposal talks about design, then you should talk about design. If the proposal doesn't mention design and sort of doesn't like, they might throw around buzzwords, but it seems like the people who wrote the request for proposal are doing the same thing where they spend a couple of days on Wikipedia and are just throwing around buzzwords. Honestly, I would propose in kind. I would not then get too like I would give them jargon back is what I would do. So, because sometimes, I mean, like it's great if you have the digital service on the other side of your proposal evaluating the work that you did, but I've seen situations where government evaluators don't really, who are asking for Agile and asking for all these forward things, like don't actually know how to recognize it when they get it in proposals. And in some ways you're safer writing something that feels more familiar to them.
Great, thank you. That was a really interesting conversation, and I think highlights a lot of the areas that we think about in terms of usually an RFP will ask for an end product, and a lot of the work that we do is searching for how a user experience is in a journey to actually identify what the end product is, and so sometimes, or a lot of times, those two things don't match up. We have about 17 minutes left for the workshop. So I am going to open this up to questions from the audience. So if you would like to ask a question, please feel free to unmute yourself. And if you're not able to talk out loud, feel free to throw a question into the chat.
I've probably the least experience, so I can start by asking the most many questions.
Okay, great. Dan, go ahead.
Thanks all. This has been very interesting. I'm trying to learn about this because I'm trying to move into that space. And I know that I don't really have a really general idea of what procurement. I'd like to learn more. One of the questions, just to reassure, a lot of the things you've not complained about, but seen trouble with, also happened in the private sector. At least 3 of my last clients in the private sector have done a lot of the same things you find problematic. with companies trying to do government contracts. But the question I have is, you talked a lot about how some of the barriers for companies to get into working with government. And one thing I don't know, this may be an obvious and main question, is how would a company that hasn't worked with government discover and learn about that these things, that these RFPs exist?
That's a great question, and I'll just repeat it back. The end question was, for a company that hasn't been involved in responding to RFPs before government contracts, how do you even find out that the RFP exists or that you can propose a bid?
Yes, sorry if I'm not coming across, my audio isn't well, but as we know, it's warm and I'm a fan. Sorry about that.
No worries.
That makes no, that's fine. So the most common place that the government will post their requests on is a website called FedBizOps, FedBizOpps. And I think this website is featured in that movie with Jonah Hill and the other guy who get start getting Department of Defense contracts and like way underbidding on them, and then it's a whole thing. I enjoyed it from the procurement perspective. But so things are posted on FedBizOps. However, the way the procurement process is very painful for inside the government too. And very often government agencies will set up what are called strategic sourcing vehicles. And that is when they say, hey, industry, we're going to buy a ton of development services, and we're just going to award a contract that has 70 vendors on it who can do software development. And then every time we need software development, we're just going to go to these 70 vendors instead of like going to the open market, because they think it will save them time, which is pretty debatable, and also ends up like locking them into 70 vendors who are usually kind of like the big government players already, who very much know how to play the game and don't always deliver the best services in good faith to the government. They would say, of course they do, but I think the profit motive is strong here in DC. So like the first place to go is FedBizOps. The second place, I bet Mike would have more advice on this, but I think it comes down to networking to hear about those other kinds of opportunities that would be an opportunity to be a subcontractor on a prime contractor type relationship. Mike,
yeah, perhaps I could clarify. I'm not asking because I'm trying to bid on the contract. In projects I've done with often underserved populations, one of the big barriers we see is that people don't even know services are available, and we've sometimes found that by working on services and tools to help bring to the people, the underserved populations, that these services exist, that's often a vector for education into mentoring or tutoring or teaching them how to get into the system that they previously were unaware existed at all. So I was wondering if there's parallels in models. But thanks, that was a good answer.
Yeah.
Michael, I think you were about to say something, but we couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of the traditional way that the game is played, right? And so the non-traditional way, and what I tell a lot of non-traditionals, a lean way to go about dipping your toe, if that's possible, into the government space, because once things come out on FBO, which I posted into the link here, the link to FBO, FedBizOps, once things are posted by there, it's too late, right? The whole world knows about the opportunity. Folks have already formulated the frameworks for their proposals. They have teaming arrangements set up, unless it's like a draft request for information where they're kind of testing. But that is where the government officially is required to post a lot of their stuff. What I recommend to non-traditional companies that are looking to test the waters, yes, subcontracting is a thing, but there's two things. One, ask yourselves, it's almost like an internal conversation. Ask yourselves, what user communities do you care about? And two, what mission spaces do those user communities align with? are those user communities involved with. And then you directly have opportunities that come out on a regular basis in those mission areas. And I think it's a lot easier to find champions, because that's the easy way, is to find champions in those mission area spaces. Because honestly, folks that aren't in DC, you guys are the crown jewels. You guys are the shining stars that people are looking to align with. You look really good with people proposing you on their teams. And so it's a semi-wow thing that people can put into their proposals, that, hey, I have somebody that's non-traditional out there. And that's a whole nother conversation. But I'll just give the example for the competition that Andrew and I worked on, that the big one with 100 contractors that came in at the industry day, which typically is an event that happens before a major contract competition happens, where people get together and it facilitates teaming, and then the government can talk about the requirement. There was 1 or 2 people that had like a plaid shirt on, button up, and no jacket, jeans, and like tennis shoes or boots. And everybody else was in suits, right? And my boss got up on stage and he was like, listen, if you guys see somebody without a suit in here, that's who you need to look to be teaming with, because those are the folks that know what they're doing. And those were the non-traditionals that had flown in from wherever or were in the area that, and anyway, Andrew, I equaled your ramble. So I can't equal the artwork, but in the background, but I can equal your ramble.
That's great. I just also want to vocalize Bonnie's question. She asked, do you recommend being a subcontractor to an existing approved vendor as your first engagement? And Erica, you said yes, starting as a sub is a great way to get a sense of the federal contracting world. And then Andrew, you chimed in saying starting as a sub is a great learning experience to derive know-how from the prime contractor, but it's very important that the teaming agreement between primes and subs is mutually beneficial. So just want to vocalize that for folks that watch this recording. We have time for maybe one more question, depending on how deep we get. So does anyone else have any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Great.
So this is Annie from San Jose, Code for San Jose. So right now we are trying to work with the Santa Clara County Probation Department to help them redo their website. I guess I was wondering if there are some examples of volunteer organizations, such as the brigades, working with government organizations for long periods of time, so like a year or more.
Not that I know of. I mean, Erica, Andrew.
Yeah, I know there's nonprofits. I know, for example, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative has been known to do that type of thing. They have a lot of colleagues, former U.S. Digital Service folks, that I guess they could be considered nonprofit, giving out grants for that kind of work. I know they have a social and social justice program, but that's the only one that I know of, and I know they're kind of a big player, so they're not exactly perfect for everybody's situation. But that's kind of is that what you mean, Annie? Kind of those kind of organizations that are doing that kind of work?
Yeah, definitely, like nonprofits, almost informal work, but just like side projects that some agencies or organizations could use help with, but don't know where to go for that help.
That's us, U.S. Digital Service. Erica, plug us.
Just to highlight a little bit what Annie's talking about, as well as that a lot of brigades across the country will work with local government, either county or the city, on projects in a volunteer capacity. And so I think that some of this leads to, is there any advice that you would have for a brigade that is working with their local government on a project in order to make that successful?
Mm-hmm.
Well, as a designer, I'll always say it's easier to measure twice than cut once. It's much easier to put a proposal, a straw man into what you're trying to do. It drums up a lot of support from stakeholders. I'll always be a proponent of saying it's much easier when you talk about prototypes to do foundation and user research, and maybe a more simple prototype that maybe you can use to get more backing from either that local government or nonprofits to help you out on that kind of work. It shows a dedication to that you understand the people that you're really trying to do this for, and you understand the mission, and you understand what kind of KPIs you're trying to improve, what kind of data points you're trying to improve, rather than saying, hey, this kind of needs improvement. That would be my only thing. But I assume if everybody's on this call, I assume you all might know that already, that's a good way to kind of start out by gathering requirements from your users and really understanding your user base first. And then putting that though into a proposal, trying to get out the prototypes as early and often as possible and kind of show people what you're thinking for an end state is usually a really great way. Picture's worth 1,000 words. So that's what I've seen a lot of success with, even across all of the procurements that I've been a part of.
I can talk about one thing that helped at Open Oakland, if people aren't aware of that already. We've used the model that Chicago had developed for the civic user testing cut group, that we started building our own independent resource and frameworks for recruiting a pool of people, getting on site with them, didn't matter what the testing was going to be, we just wanted to have the process in place for usability testing, so that when the need for usability testing came up, we had a pool of people, we had a location, we had protocols, and we had people and volunteers who were ready to jump in and do that. That can lower one barrier to implementing usability testing for anything. Just we've already dealt with recruitment, we've already dealt with citing, we've already dealt with protocol. We know how to do this.
Great, thank you. So we have about 4 minutes left. This has been extremely interesting and informative. So thank you, Michael, Andrew, and Erica so much. I will ask one final question, and just in the interest of time, I'm sure this could be a lengthy answer, but if there was one kind of part you could change about the procurement process as is, what would that be and why?
Okay, I'll go first. Involving subject matter experts. This is already happening, but I want to see it done more. I want to see more designers, technologists, just like technologists and designers and product people are leaving the private sector to join government. I want to see more of those same people leave USDS and become procurement officers. I want to see more of the time focused on procurement. It's a force multiplier when you can bring in people just like yourself rather than doing it by yourself. So I want to see more people actually getting into the understanding on how procurements are done and get into the intricacies of writing. Otherwise, there will be that person who has been in the government for decades and decades who will write that RFP, and it doesn't matter what it says in it. If you don't take interest to it, it will go out as is. So I want to see more of the people not only become advisors on these procurements and actually help these evaluators understand tech jargon and understand what to look for in design and product, but not only that, get ahead of it even more by getting to the point of writing the RFP, getting to the point of actually crafting the proposal, the request for proposal as well. It's been done, and Mike and Erica have already done this to the nth degree. But what I would want to change is I want to see that across more agencies than there are today. I want to see more growth.
Thank you.
Mike? You can go, Mike. Okay, I'll go. I think I would like to see like an allowance in the process for common sense, because it's really, really formalized, and the government is very afraid of getting a protest and then it going to court. It becomes like everything that's written down in the procurement process becomes extremely legalized to protect the government from protests. And so, I mean, maybe the answer would be to make it a little bit harder to protest the government. You'd have to have something legitimate to protest. But I mean, maybe the answer is also like to have sort of an allowance for common sense, like plain language expectations and common sense questions, and like allowing for more conversation between vendors and the government, which the government is just so cautious about any kind of exchange back and forth that's less formal than like a written sort of document. Here we can prove to everybody that we're not favoring one vendor over the other. I think that really, really hurts everybody in the process.
Yeah, the two things I would change is, one, there's a lot of strategic decision making with buying stuff and getting the best outcome, the best vendor. But there's a lot of procedural crap that just happens that could be automated that would really speed up the delivery of that service or product to the end product owner, the end person that would use it. So that's one thing, and I forgot the other, so we'll just keep it at one.
We're at time, but there was one really great question that Whitney asked. So for everybody that's able to stay just an extra minute or two, the question is, what about if the stakeholder doesn't have the talent to maintain technology, and how can training be provided to stakeholders when procuring tools? This is something that comes up a lot when brigades are creating tools for government or other entities, is that those entities don't have the ability to maintain that tool, and so therefore that work kind of fades off, or sometimes may even just kind of get wasted after a while because there's nobody to maintain it.
I mean,
you
go.
I was going to say, it's probably my only piece of advice would be to try to set that up in a charter in the beginning. And I know it's a lot of pre-work to do, but see, you as a brigade, everybody as a brigade needs to understand the lifespan of the product that they're about to create. You need to understand where that thing's going to go. And even if it looks bleak, at least everybody knows at the beginning of how this thing is going to live through its life. You know, that's the life cycle. The worst thing is we've developed this fantastic product, and to Whitney's question, we delivered it and they don't have the talent to do that. Setting up charters where the stakeholder and you as the brigade understand kind of the truth. You know, that's one of our principles, is find the truth, tell the truth. If that charter says we're going to deliver something awesome, but listen, we just don't have the talent to maintain it, you can get ahead of things by, and I can't be too specific, but finding ways to, as you're building the product, work on that life cycle in the back end. Can you get some more budget to hire different people to maintain the product? Can you build that into the tool itself? Can you choose different technologies that are less, need less management, less technical oversight from whatever team is? And doing stakeholder mapping, actually, one of the colleagues, Ben Smithgold, a former Code for America person, said, is stakeholder mapping actually allows you to understand the ecosystem after you've delivered that tool. So if you understand, listen, this group has absolutely no technical expertise, that might actually help you in the decisions you make when developing that. And it doesn't always end up really great, but at least you've done that work in the beginning, so you're not disappointed at the end when your tool kind of fades into the background.
That's great. Thanks so much. And with that, we are 3 minutes over time. So want to thank everybody for joining us and participating, and especially thank Michael, Andrew, and Erica for joining us and providing so much insight into your work and how folks can get involved. So if folks are interested in learning more, let me know, and maybe we can do some type of follow-up, or I'm sure Michael, Andrew, and Erica might be able to answer some questions in another format. So thank you so much, and have a great evening, everybody. And this it's been recorded. So thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.